continuously does this. They say we only use a fraction of our brain's true potential. Now, that's when we're awake. When we're asleep, our mind can do almost anything.
Such as?
Well, imagine you're designing a building, right? You consciously create each aspect. But sometimes it feels like it's almost creating itself, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, like I'm discovering it.
Genuine inspiration, right? Mm-hmm. Now, in a dream, our mind continuously does this. We create and perceive our world simultaneously, and our mind does this so well that we don't even know what's happening. That allows us to get right in the middle of that process.
How?
By taking over the creating part. Now, this is where I need you. You create the world of the dream. We bring the subject into that dream, and they fill it with their subconscious.
How could I ever acquire enough detail to make them think that it's reality?
Well, dreams, they feel real while we're in them, right? It's only when we wake up that we realize something was actually strange. Let me ask you a question. You never really remember the beginning of a dream, do you? You always wind up right in the middle of what's going on.
I guess, yeah.
So how did we end up here?
Well, we just came from the,
Think about it, Ariadne. How did you get here? Where are you right now?
Yippers. That is a clip from Nolan's Inception, a Gnostic-themed movie. That's certainly the view of Brown University professor Nicola Denze Lewis in her book, Introduction to Gnosticism, and in our interview that you can find in Other Voices of Gnosticism. The film is about dreams, and that will be our infernal topic on this October, the year of our Demiurge 2017. But this is not a dream, but your awakening from Archon-induced nightmares that made you believe you were human in a place called the material universe. Yes, you have awakened, for you have materialized at Aeon Byte Gnostic Radio.
I want to live a real life. I don't want to dream any longer.
This is your incessant and so liberating quest in understanding history's most famous but least understood heretics, the Gnostics and their brethren in the esoteric and Dionysian freethought. As my friend Jim says, it's hard to understand the Gnostics because it's hard to understand reality. Gnosticism's chief thrust is to decipher reality and break it down into a state of unreal awareness. Philip K. Dick's two-pronged quest was to understand what makes a human human and what is reality. In between, he realized there is gnosis and Simon Magus lives, as he says in his exegesis.
Do not try and bend the spoon. That's impossible. Instead, only try to realize the truth.
What truth?
There is no spoon.
There is no spoon?
Then you'll see that it is not the spoon that bends, it is only yourself.
William James said God, being omniscient, can only know what is known. And God, being omnipotent, can only do what is possible. Not us awakened inception agents, for we have been baptized by the 5 seals of the Sethians and entered the bridal chamber of the Valentinians. We know the unknown, and we are doing what is impossible. So glad you've materialized one more week for one more raging against heaven and storming the gates of hell for our misplaced childhoods and paradises lost. And the dreams of Icarus and Prometheus and Hecate.
You mustn't be afraid to dream a little bigger, darling.
We're writing our own gospel. We're living our own myth. We're running with those searching for the truth and avoiding those who have found it. I am Abraxas, in his meat space incarnation of Miguel Connor, broadcasting from the frigid but lawful dystopia of Chicago. I am your Pompatus of Gnosis, but so are you, as your company in this quest makes us realize we are all divine, rising together but standing divided. As mentioned, our topic is dreams. Gordon White, in his Chaos Protocols, said that some of the best spiritual tech is meditation, which happens to be free. And I could say the same about dreams or dream work. I delve in both meditation and dream work, but could work harder. But so it is, and I've got FOMO to deal with and excuses galore for my simian brain.
You are a smelly pirate hooker.
Anywho, dreams are where we enter into the caliphates of the collective unconscious and tap into the power of symbols and archetypes. Myths are public dreams, and dreams are private myths, according to Joseph Campbell. And in myth you find belonging, freedom, and meaning. Certainly relevant to all I've said, here and now, it was Jung who said, "Your vision will become clear only when you can look into your heart." Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens.
Everything is backwards now. Like out there is the true world, and in here is the dream.
And not surprising, we'll get into plenty of Jungian dream interpretation. How the ancients, from the Greeks to the Native Americans, leveraged dreams to expand their awareness. And tools for you to harness dreams to make reality less of a nightmare. To become free. Our astral guest will do this and more, so much more, and that is Tom Verner, co-author of The Transformational Power of Dreaming. A dreamy book in both content and revelation. Glad to have Tom at the virtual Alexandria, as he's been working with dreams for many decades. And along with co-author Stephen Larson, leads many people on how to interpret dreams and understand prophetic dreams, as you will see in our interview. I mean, it was Jung again who said, "We have forgotten the age-old fact that God speaks chiefly through dreams and visions." And by God, he probably means our inner Osiris or Thoth.
Sorry, Quaid. Your whole life is just a dream.
And yes, first part of the interview is available, while the second is for members. Oh, thank you, you children of Morpheus, who keep this dream of Sophia going every week. I can't do it without you.
But where is it written that all our dreams must be small ones?
Oddly enough, there is very little dreams in Gnostic texts. Probably because their writings are living dream journals, where these ancient heretics recorded their visions and astral flights across the heavens, ruled by hating angels and aeonic spirits. Many Gnostic writings are certainly dreamlike, with their psychedelic, shifting narratives where characters suddenly split into many in one scene, or odd figures appear out of nowhere in another scene, and vanish like mist after some poetic revelation. Kinda like Jung's Red Book, or many episodes in the new Twin Peaks.
This is the water, and this is the well. Drink full and ascend.
But hey, this is the dream of the alien god who lost his wisdom. His bad dream nothing more than, yes, us. This is the dream of the Red King of Alice in Wonderland and the dream of Vishnu.
The Matrix is a computer-generated dream world, built to keep us under control.
One place that mentions dreaming is in the Apocalypse of Peter, where the Sethian author slams the cult of Simon Magus, referencing Simon and Ellen as the naked men and women. Yes, the Gnostics had sometimes venom for each other. Here is the passage. For some of them will blaspheme the truth and proclaim evil teaching, and they will say evil things against each other. Some will be named, those who stand in the strength of the archons, of a man and a naked woman who is manifold and subject to much suffering. And those who say these things will ask about dreams. And if they say that a dream came from a demon worthy of their error, then they will be given perdition instead of incorruption. Oh dear, maybe dreams are a problem. You never know what's a trap.
It's a trap!
But enough of my drivel. Led us to a better dreaming and an amazing awakening with our interview with Tom Verner on his new book, The Transformational Power of Dreaming.
Things have been tough lately for dreamers. They say dreaming's dead. No one does it anymore. It's not dead, it's been forgotten. Removed from our language. Nobody teaches it, so no one knows it exists. The dreamer's banished to obscurity. Well, I'm trying to change all that, and I hope you are too. By dreaming every day. Dreaming with our hands and dreaming with our minds. Our planet is facing the greatest problems it's ever faced. Ever. So whatever you do, don't be bored. This is absolutely the most exciting time we could have possibly hoped to be alive. And things are just starting.
This is the Aeon Byte interview, and with us we definitely have the pleasure of being joined by Tom Verner to discuss his book, The Transformational Power of Dreaming. How are you doing today, Tom?
I'm doing great, Miguel, and looking forward to having a wonderful discussion about this amazing world of dreams and dreaming.
Oh, agreed. I really enjoyed the book, and it gave me a lot of insights, and has always told me I really need to step up my dream work. I do some, but not enough, and your book brought a lot of new dimensions to it, which we look forward to discussing. And also with us, we are joined by the Moondog Vance. How are you today, Vance?
I'm doing great, except I think I might be dreaming all this.
Yes, well, we probably are. We probably are. As from Lewis Carroll, we are all the dream of the Red King, or some said we are the dream of Vishnu. But that's what we're going to find out, because, again, I really enjoyed Tom's book. So tell us, Tom, when in history did humans start recording or beginning to take attention to the world of dreams?
I just wanted to say something that popped into my mind that's related to your question. When Vance said he may be dreaming all this, the Australian Aborigines love to say there's a dream dreaming us, or that we're a dream in some way, whatever that might mean. But it seems that human beings, for as long as we know, in terms of recorded history, have been interested in dreams. And the first actual, what we might call dream journal, was 1200 BC from Egypt. The Egyptian dream book, we actually have a picture of it in the book, Transformational Power of Dreaming. And it's a record of 100 dreams, and the Egyptian dreamer organized the dreams, classified them in different categories, and gave interpretations of these dreams. And that's true of, well, if we just stick to that part of the world and not necessarily go to China and India, and we can talk about that perhaps in the course of the interview, but the Greeks and the Hebrews all seem to be very interested in dreams. And we have accounts of their recording and working with dreams. So it's been for a long time.
Yes, I believe you write that the first recorded dream, or about somebody dreaming, isn't there an ancient, it's written somewhere, there's the dream of Tammuz?
The dream of Tammuz is, one of the earliest recorded dreams, and that's from that same period as the Egyptian Book of Dreams, over 1,000 years before Christ. And one thing that I could say about their understanding of dreams, say just taking those three peoples, the Egyptians, the ancient Greeks, and the Hebrews, is that there seems to be some understanding that there's a source of wisdom or guidance or healing inside of us, or a place where the human world and the other world, whether we call that, the world of God or spirit or some deeper wisdom, where they meet. And one of the places they seem to meet most powerfully in the understanding of these ancient dreamers is in the dream world. And there's many accounts, as we know from the Bible, for instance, where God speaks to the Hebrews in the dream state. So that's a kind of general sense that there was some understanding that we could get in touch with some deeper wisdom in the dream state.
Indeed. I mean, you have, I believe it's Jacob has a dream. You have, and this is stuff that you bring out in your book. You've got Joseph interpreting dreams of the Pharaoh. You've got Daniel interpreting the dreams of Nebuchadnezzar. Hopefully I'm not butchering his name, the Babylonian king. So yes, you definitely have, even in the Old Testament, dreams really meant something, didn't they?
They did, and one of my favorite lines, as far as dreams are concerned, is from the book of Joel, and I think Luke, in his gospel, cites this. Joel says, God will pour out his spirit upon all flesh, and your sons and daughters shall prophesy, and your young shall see visions, and your old ones will dream dreams, and God will appear to them. So there's a wonderful book by a Jungian analyst and Episcopal priest named Morton Kelsey called God, Dreams, and Revelation. And I heard him give a talk many years ago on this idea of the place of dreams and visions in the Old and New Testament. And at some point during his talk, he held up a large version of the New and Old Testament, and he had gone through it and cut out with an X-Acto knife every reference to dreams and visions. And he just held it up and paged through it, and it was shredded, just as a dramatic visual aid of how much dreams and visions appear in our Western Bible. So they were very important to those people.
Yes, and in one section of the book, I loved this chapter, or one chapter in a section. Maybe I am dreaming, but you talk about the rites of Asclepius and how intricate they were. Could you tell the audience about this god of healing and how important dreams were to the well-being of the Greeks?
It's one of the kind of most important, I think, for me, and maybe for your listeners, to really understand the nature of dreaming that's still as alive and well today as it was for those ancient Greeks. So around 500 BC, there were, around ancient Greece, about 300 temples, some of them very small, some of them very large, like almost we could think of as holistic health centers in the city of Epidaurus, north of Athens. And these were temples to the god of healing, Asclepius. And his symbol is one we still see today because it's the symbol that the American Medical Association has taken for their symbol, the caduceus with the twin serpents coiled around it. We could talk about the symbolism of the serpent, but what people would do is they would pilgrimage to one of these temples, one of these 300 temples, and with a question, a problem, a physical problem, a emotional, mental, spiritual problem that they were trying to find some guidance about. And they would go to the temple attendant, who in Greek was called therapeutos, where we get the word therapist. And the pilgrim would talk to the therapeutos about the problem, question, the concern, the disease, whatever it was that they were going to ask Asclepius for some guidance concerning in a dream. And after they clarified the question and their problem, and these therapeutos, there's recordings, especially in the great center at Epidaurus, would ask very sophisticated psychological questions. Say, for instance, something Freud called secondary gains. The therapeutos might say, what are the benefits you're getting from this problem? And questions like that. And so the question would be clarified and deepened, and then night would come, and they would go in to what was called the Abaddon, which was the inner chamber of the temple, where there might be a marble slab with a soft sheepskin on it, and they would go to sleep. And at Epidaurus, this might seem a little creepy to some people, but there were large black, non-poisonous snakes crawling through the temple there. And people would feed those snakes as they went to sleep. And they truly believed, in the deepest sense of metaphor, that that snake didn't just symbolize Asclepius. Those snakes were Asclepius. And so they would feed the snake, and they would go to sleep with the sound of these snakes. And they would wake up in the morning, hopefully with a dream. If not that night, they might sleep another night. And they would talk to the therapeutos about their dream. And at Epidaurus, there's graffiti, stone-carved graffiti on the walls to this day of people's accounts of the healing dreams they received. And this practice of incubating a dream, asking for a dream in response to a specific question or concern, is a practice that was done in China, India, the Middle East, the Iroquois on our continent, and numbers of other indigenous peoples in North America practiced dream incubation. Do you have any specific questions? Oh, there's still a lot more we can talk about it, but what comes to mind when you hear this, or read about it?
I'll let's see if Vance has a question, then I'll go.
I thought of Carl Jung when you talked about what the Greek practices were. That's the way it struck me.
Can you say specifically what it was about Jung?
Well, yeah, the therapeutos in the temples, they were the psychologists. They sounded like early psychologists. Of course, you know, Freud and Jung both were into interpretation of dreams.
Yeah, certainly, even more so than Freud, Jung really, really used dreams. We certainly know Freud did. But Jung once said before he wrote his first word about dreams, he had already listened to and worked with 67,000 dreams, his own and those of his patients. And the dreams for him, as for Freud, you may recall, they called it the royal road to the unconscious, to this deep source of wisdom and guidance and really imagination that we carry inside of us. So dream incubation is very much related to Jung's understanding of dreams, in the sense that there's this constant, ongoing conversation or dialogue between the waking world and this dream world. And and that goes on whether we pay attention to it or not. Most people I run into in the subject of dreams come up, almost more than half the people say, I don't dream. And that's just not possible. And we can talk about what happens to people who are deprived of their dreams. They become really deranged and present as if they're paranoid, schizophrenic. But there's this dialogue going on all the time. And we have over 2 hours of dreaming every night, whether we remember them or not. And something, and that's an interesting question, something essential is being done for us physically and emotionally and spiritually in that dream state. And I'd love to elaborate on that. But what incubation does is it makes that process more conscious, and you participate in it in an active, conscious, intentional way.
Yeah, Tom, we definitely want to get to the dream world more in the modern times, and Carl Jung and all that, but I'd like to stick a little bit with the history of dreaming so the audience can get a perspective. Okay. And your book brings plenty of examples. For example, you talk about how St. Augustine's mother, Monica, she had a dream that he would join Christianity and so forth. So there's lots of dreams. Are there any really, you might say, famous dreamers or dreams that really strike at you that you would like to share with the audience?
Well, I was raised in a small Irish Catholic coal mining town, and we can talk a little bit about that because it has a lot to do with my interest in dreams. But my patron saint is Thomas Aquinas. My name is Thomas. And Aquinas, as probably many of your listeners know, is probably, along with Augustine and Anselm and a couple others, was the greatest of the medieval theologians. And fairly close to the end of his life, a year or so before he died, he had a dream that he was taken up to the gate of heaven and met Peter and the Apostle Paul, and then saw a vision of paradise, and in this vision dream state, and he woke up and he said about his incredible Summa Theologica, this great, great work of theology, he said, it's all straw compared to what I saw, and it should all be burned. Thank goodness it wasn't burned, but he didn't write another word after that. He just kept remembering that dream and that vision that he had. That's one of my favorites. Another is Joan of Arc, whose father, appalled, had a dream of her when she was still a young child, dressed in military clothes and going off on a great horse, and he was just ashamed. I mean, in some literal way, apparently it was because she was dressed in men's clothes. Like, that was just appalling and totally a source of shame and scandal. And he saw it in his dream. And she, of course, went on to do that and then was called on. There's something about the relationship between, and we make this throughout the book in many ways, between the dream world, the world of imagination, And there was a third thing I was going to say, which I can't think of at the moment. But Joan eventually was put on trial as a heretic because she was claiming God sent her these visions in this mission that she was to go on to save France. And the cardinal in the Inquisition said to her, Joan, this is all in your imagination. And Joan of Arc said to the cardinal, of course it is, Your Eminence. How else does God speak to us but through our imagination?
Wow. Very powerful.
So powerful.
Amazing.
And wonderful about that. And what it does, whatever else it does, is it just elevates the imagination to something other than that which is unreal. That it's maybe the voice of God in us, that creativity and that dreaming. And anyhow, there are two, Thomas and Joan of Arc, that come to mind. Famous medieval, sort of, not ancient, but medieval dreamers.
Yes, and I had forgotten there was the famous silence of Thomas Aquinas, how at one point he decided that he could not express really what God wanted, so he went silent. But also, you also write about another famous medieval dreamer, and that is Hildegard of Bingen, or Bingen. Am I saying that right, Tom?
Hildegard.
Hildegard.
That's okay. In German, it would be Hildegard von Bingen. From the town of Bingen. She was a famous abbess of a monastery there. Actually, I went in search of it once when I was in Germany, but sadly, I never found it. But I went looking for it, and she was one of the great Renaissance women of that time, and she was a painter, extraordinary paintings, and a composer of amazing music, which we still have to this day, and there's many recordings available and books of her paintings. Many of the musical compositions and the images in her paintings and the writings were from her dreams. And Matthew Fox, some of your listeners may know of Matthew Fox's work in creation spirituality, he calls it, and a lot of it is inspired and informed by the work of Hildegard von Bingen, and I would really encourage the listeners to get her work or go online and see her paintings and listen to her music, and much of it, and that's a whole other topic we could get into, how dreams have been a source of creativity and where great artworks have come from Hildegard to Sting. Every breath I take, that song of his, he woke up in the middle of the night, wrote it down, the lyrics, the chord changes, went back to sleep, woke up the next morning, looked over, and there on his bedstand was this song. He had no record whatsoever of writing it down. And there are hundreds of examples of how great art and scientific theories and films and all sorts of things have come from the dream world. But I digress from those ancient and medieval dreamers. Do you want to talk some more about them?
Yes. This is interesting. Most people don't know about all these dreamers and what they provided to civilization. Do you have any, Vance?
Yeah, I was wondering about the ancient Gnostics and dreaming because Miguel and I realized that it's a subject that hasn't been covered too well. Do you know anything about that, Tom?
About the place of dreams specifically in Gnosticism?
Exactly.
I don't know a lot about that. I do know that in Elaine Pagel's book, I think the one on, I think it's called Beyond Belief.
Right.
I think it focuses on the Gospel of Thomas.
Yeah, that's it.
She has some discussion in there, I think, around Irenaeus and some of the church fathers, and there was dissension in the community, the Gnostic community, of dreams as a source of truth or dreams as lying dreams or false dreams, and what kind of discernment we need. And I think there's tremendous wisdom in that. Is this God speaking, or is this my inflated sense of myself? Or it's an important question. But specifically, do you know? I know you've written and interviewed and explored and reflected on Gnosticism a lot. Is dream something that you know something about in terms of Gnosticism, or have you come across that?
I personally have not given it that much thought. I really haven't run into much, but it's something I probably do need to research beyond Elaine Pagel. So this should be very interesting, definitely. And again, we'll find out what insights we might find. I mean, the Gnostic texts are very dreamlike when you read them. They're definitely, as Jung said, they're expressing some deeper echelons of the soul and going into the collective unconscious. So in a way, I mean, and of course it was an ecstatic religion. They were having visions. They were, as April DeConnick says in her book, her new book, The Gnostic New Age, they were doing almost like sleep therapy. When you read their texts, there's almost snoring sounds in some of their works, and they're doing contemplation and meditation. So they were probably tapping into the Vide of Asclepius and those other mystery religion schools.
Yeah. And Gnosticism, and again, I am woefully ignorant of it in any detail, but it seems very interested in that relationship between spirit and flesh and matter and spirit, and dreams seem to, like consciousness itself, it seems like dependent on matter but independent of it and mysterious, and dreams seem to come from that world that, in my limited knowledge of Gnosticism, they seem to be really interested in.
Agreed. Yeah, they were tapping into the collective unconscious in those days. But one more I want to talk about, historical figure, which really blew me away, Tom, is Harriet Tubman, and how what she did, the great good she did for the world, was really influenced by her dreams.
Very much so. I mean, she was, her work was really difficult and dangerous, and she took her life in her hands all the time, doing her Underground Railroad work during the Civil War, and she was really a clairvoyant. And one of the things I think that kept her going was an early dream vision of the slaves being freed. And it comes out in a story of when she was told, there's all this celebration going on, and she says, what are you celebrating? And they said, President Lincoln has issued the Emancipation Proclamation. And she at that point said, I had a dream about that, I think it was 3 years earlier. And it carried her. Her dreams and her visions inspired her to keep her work going. And I think in the book, I say that my two most important teachers in my life was the contemporary Jungian scholar James Hillman, who was the first head of studies at the Jung Institute in Zurich, Switzerland, and my other great teacher was, the social reformer, social justice worker Dorothy Day, the founder of the Catholic worker movement, and I lived in a Catholic worker house for many years. And for me, I just need to insert this in our conversation, that for me, like I think with Harriet Tubman, not to compare myself to her, but when I think of dream, I think of the way Jung would talk about a dream, that great vision of the night that we have and comes from the personal and from the collective unconscious and is somewhat personal, but also I can't help but have in the back of my mind, I have a dream, and the way Martin Luther King would use that word, that it's a vision of possibility of where we're going, both as an individual and as a people. And I think that Jung once said the difference between the way he regarded dreams and the way Freud regarded dreams, there were many big differences, but one, he said, Freud is interested in the dream telling us where we're coming from. And it's almost like the way that term used to be used on the street. Where are you coming from? Like, what's going on? What's going on behind what you're saying? Where are you coming from, man? That Freud was interested in where the dream told us we were coming from, like those early traumas, those difficult early experiences. And Jung thought the dream was more interested in where are we going. And that he once said that if an acorn had a dream, it would be of an oak tree. That he felt dreams were progressive, and Freud saw them as regressive, like taking us back. And so I think that works both personally and socially, that dreams hopefully are guiding us towards some better sense of self, as well as sense of us as a people.
That's a great point.
That's where you're asking about Harriet Tubman. Amazing. I actually have a picture of her, a painting of her in one of the rooms of my house. She's an amazing woman, and there's a great underground railroad museum, the Rokeby Museum, very close to my house, which is the Underground Railroad went through this part of Vermont, taking people to Canada. Anyhow, that's what comes to mind.
Yes, what you said reminded me, I think it was Joseph Campbell who said that myths are public dreams and dreams are private myths. Again, we keep going to the collective unconscious and that repository of answers that give answers and insights to the world. I mean, and you give plenty of examples in your book, Tom. Even Descartes, even though he's considered the great rationalist, a lot of his insights came from dreams, ironically, and great scientific breakthroughs came from dreams, right?
Yeah, and he had one powerful dream. I can't recall whether we recount this one in the book or not, but I know James Hillman, my teacher, makes a great deal of this, that he, just as what you were saying, the great rationalist who was reducing things more and more to to, one idea. In many ways, the rational mind. Descartes had a dream that is just, for someone like myself who loves language and the etymology of words and how much we can, James Joyce once said, more energy is released from splitting atoms, as in etymology, splitting the roots of words. He said more energy is released from splitting atoms than from splitting atoms. That words can teach us so much.
Wow, great quote.
Descartes opened up his dictionary in his dream, and the words were disappearing from the book. And every time he opened it, there were less and less words. I mean, that's a terrifying dream as far as I'm concerned. But that's he was the great rationalist, and its counterpart in the scientific world, Isaac Newton, an amazing, when people want to blame the destruction of the imagination and those non-scientific parts of ourselves, they point to poor René Descartes and Isaac Newton. But Isaac Newton apparently died of lead poisoning because of all the alchemical experiments that he was doing in his laboratory. And he also was the key witness defending his mother during a witchcraft trial. And so these were complicated characters, who had a foot in the medieval world and the modern world, and right between alchemy and chemistry, and they knew about their dreams. A lot of scientists, and we have examples in the book of how great scientific theories, these so-called rationalists, or devotees of the scientific method of objectivity, and look to their dreams and their imagination. Einstein said imagination is more powerful than objective knowledge. Anyhow, these are, dreams. I mean, all the things that we've almost been talking about so far just points to these marvelous moments along the way of this great history of human beings and their connection with and interest in and guidance from the world of dreams, both personal and, the great big dreams, the ones that come from that mysterious world of what Jung called the collective unconscious.
Well said. Go ahead, Vance. You have a question?
Yeah, I was going to point out that Wolfgang Pauli had that world clock dream that was central to his scientific revelations.
I remember hearing, but it's what do you remember any specifics about it, Van?
I remember more the picture. There was kind of a complicated picture with wings and circles and so forth, and somehow it gave him the inspiration for quantum theoretical ideas. Don't remember much more beyond that.
You know that Jung and Pauli worked together, especially on the idea of synchronicity and how it seems to occur in the physical world as well as, the world of the psyche. And it's an amazing book, an amazing collaboration between a psychologist and a physicist.
I hadn't heard of that. That's great.
Yeah, he and Carl Jung had a really deep, wonderful relationship, and there is a book, I don't think I've read it, but I think it's called Jung and Pauli. But in Jung's book on synchronicity, he credits a lot of his understanding of this acausal principle of reality that he called synchronicity to his work with Wolfgang Pauli.
For the listener, definitely Tom's book, The Transformational Power of Dreaming, is, again, full of history, but it goes well beyond the history, and it offers on how to dream better today. So tell us a little bit, Tom, about your work and how you help people. How do you help people get that transformational power of dreaming?
Well, for years, I had a private, therapy practice where I saw folks on a week-to-week basis and worked with them in that kind of way, using dreams a lot. But since for the last 17 years, since I founded an organization, because besides being a psychologist, I'm also a professor of psychology, a performer, a professional magician, and I founded an organization called Magicians Without Borders, which we can talk about if we have time. But since then,
of course,
I've been traveling a lot, 37 war-torn countries around the world, performing for kids in refugee camps. I haven't had the luxury of time to work on a week-to-week basis with people. So my wife and I started, she's a visual artist, and she and I do week-long dream retreats here at our house in the mountains in Vermont. And 10 people come and live here, and we spend a week working on dreams. And just talk to describe the dream or aspect of the dream retreat that also touches on the physiology of dreaming. What we do, which horrifies people when they first hear that this is going to be part of this schedule, is we wake people up at around 4:45 in the morning. And I go around and with some flute music and gently wake people up. And then I go around in another 7 minutes. And that's the first awakening. And people often have a dream and they jot it down. And then we get up, and this is based on some work that I was not one of the leaders of the research, but actually talked to the director of this research at the Edgar Cayce Foundation, Mark Thurston, the relationship between meditation and meditating before you go to sleep or early in the morning and dream recall. So we get up, and from 5 to 5, so people wend their way to our common gathering space, and we have a half hour of meditation, part of it guided, part of it unguided. And then people go back to sleep at 5:30 to 7 o'clock, which is a 90-minute cycle, which is the cycle that dreams occur throughout the night on a 90-minute cycle. It's astonishing that there's this regular pattern. So we've built that in to the schedule. So then I'll go around at 7 o'clock and awaken people gently again, and they have another opportunity to catch a dream. And then we do all different kinds of ways of working with the dream. And we're not so much interested in going at the dream with some kind of interpretive theory and trying to interpret the folks' dreams, but rather what I like to say is, and I love this phrase in English, to make something of the dream. And we use that phrase in English, what do you make of that? Which means, how do you understand that? But we also make something from the dream. So we might sit and tell the dream, and I would suggest to your listeners that they might try this right away with their dreams. After you read the dream, and if you can tell it to your spouse or your partner or a close friend, that can be really, really wonderful. Not so much to get an interpretation, but just a response to it. What strikes the listener to your dream? But then to write down 3, 4, 5 titles to the dream. Some of them, and the reason multiple titles is dreams can be looked at from all different perspectives. You could have a really serious title, you could have a title that maybe is the title of a song or a movie, or a humorous one, a serious one, one from one character's perspective, one from another in the dream, and write 4 or 5 titles. And then maybe go through the dream and circle important. What I do is I write my dream down the center of the page in my journal. And then on either side, like I'll circle what images in the dream strike me as important: persons, places, weather, animals, whatever it is. And what are my associations with this? And write those down. And start kind of filling out the dream. It's kind of like when you go into a little store and you buy one of those really compressed little sponges that's almost the size of a credit card, and then you take it home and you soak it, and it blows up into a full sponge. It's like you're soaking this dream in associations and images and things that occur to you. Could be things from your own life, could be a movie that comes to mind, could be whatever. And then people can try writing in the dream retreat. Something we'll make of the dream is a haiku, or a couple, or 2 or 3 haiku. And you, as your listeners may know, it's just a simple Japanese poetic form of 17 syllables, 5 syllables, 7 syllables, 5 syllables. And those first 12, the first 2 lines, 5 and 7 syllables, summarize the whole dream in those 12 syllables. It's really a challenging, extremely helpful thing to do. And then the last 5 syllables give some kind of moral of the story or interpretive response in 5 syllables. And do 2 or 3 of those haiku. And we'll do that. People will then take a break. We'll go, Janet, my wife, takes them into her studio, and they do quick Japanese ink brush paintings, very quick. Not illustrations of the dream, but just expressive gestures that somehow capture the feeling of the dream. And then we'll sit, they'll pick their favorite haiku and their haiga, which is this Japanese ink painting, and they'll talk about their dream from these poetic and visual images. So that's a way that we work, and we do other things, a lot of other things. One of the things we do is on our property, we have a small house, 10 by 10, beautiful little structure, and it's only dedicated to dreaming. It's an incubation house. So each night, a dreamer will work on the day, clarifying their question, and then the therapeutos, that would be me, would go over and talk to the dreamer during the day and help them clarify their question, and they'll do journal writing and go for solitary walks and clarify the question that they want to bring to their dreams. They'll come in that night, the group will work with them, and then as it gets dark, we process out to the dream hut by torchlight, and someone takes them into the hut and tucks them in, and we're chanting outside something important to them, spontaneous chant based on their question, and then we eventually leave and go back to the house and end the day. So that gives you a little sense of one of the ways we're trying to keep alive some of these ancient practices in some modern form. I don't know if that helps, but that's one way that I'm working with dreams these days during these dream retreats.
Very useful. Yeah, go ahead, Vince.
That's amazing. Have you ever heard of a visitation dream where you feel that you actually are in the presence of either a person or living or dead? Like I've had 3 of them One of them was with John Lennon, believe it or not.
There is a very powerful visitation dream in the book that was dreamt by my 9-year-old at the time granddaughter. She's now 12 years old. And my mom had died, and we used to have dinner together every Sunday night with my daughter and her family and my mom. And she was 98 and still in pretty good shape. And she and my granddaughter, Sangita, developed a really, really wonderful relationship. My mother just loved Sangita. She used to say, I just can't get over this girl, how wonderful she is. And so the two of them had a great relationship. A couple of months after my mom passed, Gita came for dinner, and she took me aside, and she calls me Biba. She said, Biba, I want to tell you something. I had a dream about Grammy. But it wasn't a dream, Biba. It wasn't a dream. And she said that 3 or 4 times in her telling. She said, Grammy came into my room, and she woke me up and took me out. She said, I want to take you somewhere. And she took me out the door into the hall and out and up into the sky. And my brother, who died 15 years ago or so, was very close to my daughter, and she told her daughter, Sangita, a lot about my brother. And my mother said to Sangita in the dream, but it wasn't a dream, Biba. She took her up into the sky and introduced her to my brother. And my brother said, I've been watching you, and you're doing really well, and I'm protecting you and guiding you, and it's so wonderful to meet you and say hello to your mother. And then my mom took Sangita, and they started back down, and almost like, it strikes me as kind of funny, almost offhand, she remembered. She said, oh, there's someone else I want you to meet. And she goes into this other kind of cloud room, and there's Jesus. And she said, I want you to meet Jesus. And Jesus says hello to Sangita and tells her what a wonderful girl she is. And we're so happy to have your Grammy up here with us, and you'll be here with us someday also. And anyhow, my mom took her back to her bedroom, tucked her in, kissed her goodnight, and walked out into the hall. And Sangita, she said, I got up out of my bed, Biba, and I walked over to the door, and I opened it to see if she was still out there, but she wasn't. And it wasn't a dream, Biba. So there's what seems like a visitation. I'd like to say that death might end a life, but not a relationship, and that it can continue, and it can continue especially intensely and beautifully in the dream world. And it seems to have with Sangita and my mom. Does that, Vance, qualify, do you think, as what you're thinking of as a visitation dream?
Oh, definitely, and beyond. In mine, it was mostly a dialogue, and John Lennon was straightening me out about some negative thoughts I had developed about him over the years, and I woke up the next morning, and my thoughts about him had totally changed. It was just amazing. But your granddaughter's dream goes beyond mine, because John Lennon didn't take me to meet the rest of the Beatles or anything.
He didn't leave you with Yoko, at least, so that's good.
Oh no!
Well, there's still time. He might show up again.
Yes.
Well, then another thing was that, and I believe this is in your book. Paul McCartney dreamed the theme for Yesterday, and when I discovered that, and I discovered that he had originally named it Scrambled Eggs, all of a sudden I got a vision that the Beatles were the scrambled eggs, and that, in actual fact, Paul McCartney was writing about the death of the Beatles. Even then, he had sensed it coming. And at that point, I felt that John Lennon, I got chills down my spine. I felt that John Lennon was with me. I was standing right in my own kitchen, and he was saying, yes, that's exactly what it was. Now, I'm not sure that's true, but that's a waking dream I had. Isn't that weird?
Are you saying, Vince, when you read that in the book about him getting that glimpse of yesterday in a dream, that Lennon somehow was there with you?
Not exactly. I know it's in your book, but I had read it on the internet before I had known about it being in your book, and I researched it, and I'd found out that McCartney didn't have the original words, that he called it scrambled eggs. But then I had a vision of eggs that were being broken, and the eggs were the Beatles. And McCartney was mourning the death of the Beatles through the song, not even knowing it. And when I was telling my wife about this revelation, it just happened. That's when this presence came on me. And I know maybe I sound weird for saying this, but I get this feeling of being overshadowed, like all this energy comes down from somewhere up there, down my spine. I get these huge chills, and I get the feeling that John Lennon is there saying yes, not with words, but with energy. I don't know. Does that make any sense?
That makes absolute sense. Yeah, that's terrific. That's really, really wonderful. I just wonder, there's a whole book that I have. I dreamt of Woody, and it's a whole collection of books of people who have dreamt about Woody Allen, and it's just kind of interesting as a kind of cultural history. But I just wonder, I mean, I'm sure, are hundreds of thousands of dreams of the Beatles and John Lennon, and it would be amazing. I'm really interested in. You had said earlier, Miguel, that line from Joseph Campbell, that a dream is a personal myth and a myth is a collective dream.
Correct.
Something, Stephen, and I really wanted to mention this because you keep referring it, and I'm very honored, as my book, but it's also a book that I shared the writing with Stephen Larson, a really amazing dream worker and student of myth, and he wrote the authorized biography of Joseph Campbell, that immense 700-page book, Fire in the Mind. But we're both interested in, and we're creating a website, because it just seems like so much is in the air right now, with the political kind of scene in the country at the moment, and it's almost like a dream, a nightmare or whatever.
Yes.
And we're just really, really interested in what is the psyche, what is the collective psyche coming up with in response to, the current kind of political situation. And I think that, I'm sure in response to the Beatles, I mean, John Lennon, the death of John Lennon was one of the, major kind of moments in my kind of cultural life. The Beatles and Dylan and the Doors and some of those folks were the soundtrack of my coming of age. And somehow he was just out there far enough ahead of me, to be sort of letting me know what I was thinking, it seems so often. So anyhow, I'm sure that dreams have something to say about this.
You and Stefan's book bring a lot to the table, and hopefully will help many people get back to the dream and tap into their inner magic. So, but I think that's all the time we have today, Tom. I'd like to thank you very much for coming on Aeon Byte and discussing the transformational power of dreaming.
It's been a total delight, Miguel and Vince.
Thank you very much, Vance, unless you're already dreaming again.
No, I'm still here, still dreaming the dream, as my boss says.
Yeah. All right, thanks.
Thank you very much.
And there you have it, Sandman. Our interview with Tom Verner, author of The Transformational Power of Dreaming. Yes, dreams have history, and the ancients knew how to harness the gifts of dreams, just as Carl Jung did millennia later. In our second part, for members, Tom gets very deep on understanding dream symbolism, as well as grants you tools and rituals to begin making dreams work for you in waking life. The wet dream of Jehovah. And much more, including some amazing work he's doing to make a better world. So please join for a mere $5.99 a lunar cycle. Beyond full interviews, you'll get more than 350 episodes with the best and brightest in Gnosticism, Western esoteric, and free thought. You'll also be invited to our Inner Sanctum of Gnosis Facebook group, where we have some remarkable discussions and past guests hang out there, like Tim Freak, Robert Price, Sean Martin, Michael Hughes, David Perry, Robert Sullivan, and Rosamunde Miller. And I'm always there to answer your questions or issues too. Give you plenty of updates I don't share anywhere else. We are truly building a game-changing community of mystics, madmen, and sages, and a great vehicle to make your dreams manifest in the Kenoma. Becoming a member really helps keep this Red Pill Cafeteria open. You can also become a patron at Patreon, where you get some of the same benefits. Or maybe a few shekels here or there via PayPal or the US mail. You can certainly help by buying some of me books, like Voices of Gnosticism, Other Voices of Gnosticism, Stargazer, and Heretic. I can't do it without you, in more ways than one. All forms of support are found at, you got it, thegodaboveGod.can. Thank you for those of you who support on a weekly basis. And thank you all for being here. It is my hope that I and our astral guests have helped in your awakening, in building better dreams, or at least understanding them. Let me quote Carl Jung one more time, who said, "A dream that is not understood remains a mere occurrence. Understood, it becomes a living experience." Hello and goodbye as always.
I had a friend once who told me that the worst mistake that you can make is to think that you are alive, when really you're asleep in life's waiting room. The trick is to combine your waking, rational abilities with the infinite possibilities of your dreams. Because if you can do that, you can do anything. Did you ever have a job that you hated, worked really hard at? A long, hard day of work, finally you get to go home, get in bed, close your eyes, and immediately you wake up and realize that the whole day at work had been a dream. It's bad enough that you sell your waking life for minimum wage, but now they get your dreams for free.